just a minute. We are going to be, well, you're just going to be joining me while I'm working on one of my custom orders I have right now, which is a place for everything bag. And if you're curious to what that bag looks like, here is a completed one. Here's actually my completed one that I have for myself. This is a place for everything. Right now, it looks kind of like nothing else, not much. Yes, I have stuff in mine. But when you unzip it, what's so awesome about this is the amount of pockets that it has. And so, if you can see, it has pages in here, and these pages are actually removable, as given by the page strap. So, there are two removable pages. There is a mesh pocket, slip pocket. There is a zipper pocket that's mesh. Each one of these pockets has different numbers of pockets depending. This one in particular has two pockets right here, one here, two here, one here, and one here, then one here and one here, and I have one here, two here, and one here. So I usually alternate how I do them. My bigger pockets are not divided like I normally do because when I was making mine, I ran out of zipper pulls that matched. So I limited my number of pockets. You can actually make less pockets by having less zipper pulls. I will say on average, when I do these for my custom orders, I use 21 zipper pulls for the entire bag. So it is a large bag in that regards. So just to show you how I portion out when I do these, you can kind of see, can't see, I had to use chalk instead of my heat erasing pen. So just I ran out. But just so you can see how I have them kind of portioned out for pockets. When I have the dividers, that's going to be two pockets, and then there's one, and on the back it will be another mesh pocket and a clear vinyl pocket, and on the outside you have two slip pockets on the back, and on the front you have a um, zipper pocket, as you can see, and the entire bag is quilted, and everything here was quilted by me. And that's, I just finished quilting today this bag I'm working on. So if you could see, I quilted this fabric, and of course I'm holding it upside down. Of course I am when I'm showing y'all. But you see, I quilted, and usually when I quilt these, I just do a diagonal quilted. You can take any type of quilting you want to. I just, thank you so much, Remy. Um, but this one I am quilting with a yellow to match the yellow tulips in here. And so I have finished quilting the entire bag. So you can see where I've marked to where this is where my vinyl pocket will go. But you have to sew these on first before you sew the backs on, just because you can't sew vinyl and then sew pockets on the other side. So I'm going to be sewing pockets today, as well as adding my straps on the outside, how you do that, um, just to show you how I use what I use for quilting. So usually I draw one line on each piece that I need to quilt, and then I have this little handy dandy quilting foot. And so this is my initial line. I will mark one line, and this is my initial line. I'll stitch that line, and then I line this up with my line, and I put however big a space, if I want a 1/2 inch quilting space, or, and since I just do mainly straight lines, I don't do a lot of the fancy quilting, at least not yet. So, plus I like how clean the quilting lines are. And like, I can show you another bag that is in progress. It's not the same bag, but just when I say I like doing straight lines because it adds a lot of texture, this is the one I'm working on. And this is a big piece of fabric because I haven't cut everything down yet. But just to show you, when I do quilting, I do like the straight lines. I like how pretty that looks. And just if you're curious on the backside, that's what it's like on the backside. And I did a teal with this one. Sometimes I will do threads that actually match the fabrics and kind of blend in. Sometimes I do the pop of fab color. This one's going to be um, another by Annie pattern, which is called In Control. I've quilted it, but I haven't cut it out yet. So because orders took over. Welcome. So as you can see, when I have a project, everything ends up in a bag together. But the one I'm working on for an order I have right now is this tulip bag. I'm using a kind of a golden yellow seatbelt webbing. The pattern actually calls for you to use to make your own with strapping and cotton fabric. I find I like the durability of seatbelt webbing instead. You can see I've already marked where I do my stitching on each of these. So, of course, I'm not going to give out measurements because it's not my pattern, but I can show you kind of how you have certain measurements that are on here. You can kind of see where I've marked. These are where the pockets go to, either the slip or the zipper pocket. And there are also markings here where you put the different, it's harder to see because it's a darker fabric, but you can see the markings where I will put the straps and the carrying handle straps. So what I do here, I'm going to go ahead and put this on here. And if you're wondering what this is double-sided tape. This is a back maker's best friend, or at least my best friend. I love using double-sided tape because it holds everything in place where it should be the entire time while you are sewing. Now, make sure you're using double-sided tape that you know where it's from, because there are some that will gum up your needles and there's some that won't. So, just to show you, this is it stuck to. Of course, it's not stitched down, but just to show you how well it sticks. This particular one is from Wok Wok. I also use this is 1/2 inch wide double-sided tape that's from Wok Wok. I also use it from uh, Wizardry Stitchery, which is geekyhardware.com. Um, and I'm not endorsed by any of this. These are just the supplies I use. So right now I'm peeling off the double-sided tape so you can kind of see where I've pulled the backing off the tape. I make it below where my stitching's going to be, so I'm not actually stitching through the double-sided tape. Even though I have found this is great tape to stitch through and it doesn't gum up my needle, I still like to avoid it if I can. So I'll just pull the other side of my double-sided tape, and I'll show you what the outsides look like with the strap on before I sew it on. And we will move on to getting it sewn on. But I just mailed one of these off last week and I'm working on another one. So um this is like the fourth or fifth one I've made since January. So I like them, but and let's just say the new Tula Pink line that is coming out, that is actually coming out with clear vinyl. I'm going to be making another one for myself using the specialty clear vinyl instead of the mesh for the pockets that it calls for. It can use mesh or vinyl. I just prefer usually to use vinyl. I'm not vinyl mesh, but just to show you what it looks like just with the double-sided tape. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for both the back and front. And at this point, the back and front are exactly the same. They don't change until you add the next pockets. But we stitch these down first. So right now I'm just doing the prep work for the actual stitching. Like I said, I've done some of this. And if you're wondering, wait, how is that? I've already put double-sided tape in the center of this. And this is, of course, a triangle ring, which you'll hook your strap to. And I like it does call for D rings, but I prefer triangle rings because if you hook a swivel clip into a triangle ring, it doesn't make the thing just rotate constantly and everything like that. That's a personal preference. I personally like the triangle rings, but the pattern calls for D rings, so you can do either. Both work. But as far as that, The biggest thing with the By Annie patterns is not that they're the most complicated, is that they are a lot of steps. There are a whole lot of steps. And there's nothing wrong with taking your time. I've had people who've bought these from me says, I have one of these cut out, but I don't know if I'm ever gonna actually, and of course I put thread in my hair, um, get it made. Because I had one person who told me she'd quilted the fabric, but she's a little intimidated by the bag. And that's fine. I like this bag. I'm coming to where I really like the By Annie patterns a lot because I like the structure and the amount of instructions she has. Like I said, it seems like a lot at times because you're like, oh gosh, I've got to do this, 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 and this. And then I've got to do quilting and I've got to do binding. Binding's not as bad as you would think. You are making your own bias binding, which I have in this case already made my bias binding, as you can see here, where I've joined it and everything. I haven't used any yet, so of course it's still this big long piece of bias binding. But it should start to come all together. And once I get this last piece of double-sided tape off and thing, we will start sewing. But we are going to be working on getting the webbing down and then adding our exterior pockets, and then I'll set those to the, and on the inside of the exterior pockets, or the exteriors. So like on this one, just to show you, you have the mesh zipper pocket that takes up the entire inside. On the back side here, where I have the two slip pockets, you can see where it's sewn together. I have a slip pocket of mesh here. So we will add those once the exterior parts are done, but you don't do the interior until you do the exterior. And she tells you to do certain things in certain orders. So you don't want to put your clear vinyl and then still have to sew your mesh pockets on, because then that will be sewing through the clear vinyl. So there's a reason you do certain things in certain orders. Um, I said, I don't share measurements. I don't go over every single step, but I can show you what I do and some of my tips and tricks I do. All right, so I'm going to switch out to the sewing machine. All right, so I'm actually going to start down here at the bottom here, and we're going to work our way all the way across. And we start by sewing at an eighth of an inch from the edge of our webbing or handle if you do it out of like woven fabrics. Now, I will say where the things are when you connect this to your zipper gusset, it is thicker where you have the handles, whether they be a woven fabric or a webbing. That really doesn't seem to affect. They're still just as thick either way. Okay. And so we are sewing. And if you saw, I had it marked. We're going to be sewing a box up at the top and then doing the crisscross, like if you had like Velcro. A lot of times you'll do a X shape, and I will show that as I'm completing it. So if you can see, I'm going around sewing the box. Okay. And now I'm going to make my X shape. And we're going to go back across the top to make the other side of our X. Okay. And then we'll go back down the other side of our webbing. Now, what's great about using chalk as our marking, we can just take a damp cloth once I'm done and erase the markings, quote unquote. I also have heat erase markers at times, and I'll use that. And so I'm sewing it across the bottom just because I wanted to secure it one last time. And we're just going to go ahead and go across and do the next one and do it the same way. And I just find it's easier. I don't have to start and stop. It adds another layer of stitching around the perimeter of your front and back. And it's not any stitching that anybody sees. Now, a lot of times when I'm making these, I use a contrasting thread. However, this time I am using a coordinating thread on the straps, so you're not going to actually see it very well. But when I did the quilting, it showed up very well. So, like I said, we are doing our little box. So, do this, and we are going to go down. And after I do this one, I will go ahead and move on to the insides just so I can show you how I sew zippers and everything like that, how I attach zippers, since this has nothing to do with zippers. So we're going to go ahead and go over to the next hand part of the handle, and we're going to go up again till we get to those markings, do our little box, and then come back down. And then the handles and carrying strap connector are all the way sewn on for this side of the bag. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask. But right now, we are just sewing along. I said, and one reason you sew across the top instead of like across the bottom or anything like that for your X, it reinforces what's going to, when you're carrying a bag, what's going to get a lot of the stressors are at the top. So it's a good thing to actually reinforce that stitching by doing another row of stitching across the top. And if you're wondering why am I just able to just sew along without looking at instructions, one, I've made about five of these since the year started, and two, I just finished one last week. That's part of that problem. Not problem, but reasoning. All right, so just to show you, all right, so this front or back, whichever it is completely sewn on, so you can see. And if you want to see what it looks like on the back side, you can see my X's here, probably a lot better than on the front with the yellow and yellow, but you can actually see the stitching. Now, if you can see, that's also a quilting line going through there. And so we have this right here. And actually, that quilting line went straight through basically where the X was. So it kind of blends a little bit more. But so what we're going to do for the next part of this, we actually attach one of our pockets. And so whichever one I grab first. So this is the zipper pocket. And you're like, Wow, you already have the zipper pocket. And this is not where you have the lining that's separate or anything like that. Still quilted all the way right here. And I've already attached my zipper. My zipper pull is here. So what we're going to do, if you can see my chalk line that I have across here, the top of the pocket goes there. So I'm going to match it up, raw edges all the way around and pin it together. And that top line should be the top of my pocket because I've trimmed it down. It should be the same height as the pocket, and it is. And you can use clips, you can use pins. A lot of times, if you've followed me before, if I'm sewing a vinyl bag, I use clips. If I sew a um, cloth bag, I use pins. It just depends. I like pins when it's not super, super thick, but it won't move if I've got it pinned versus sometimes clips like to jump, break. Pins sometimes bend, but they don't usually jump out of your fabric. So that's just my preference. That comes from learning how to sew on clothing and pinning everything to death. So I don't pin everything to death anymore, but I still use enough pins that my stuff's not going to move. So I am pinning this in place. And I'm going to pin across the top, mainly because I want to make sure it equals up with that line that I drew. And like I said, we can take a damp cloth afterwards and get rid of that chalk. I'll pin across the bottom first. So that's the big thing, is that you just want to make sure you're comfortable. Make sure if you are using a marker on your fabric that it's something you can remove, or like with heat. Now, I will tell you with heat erase pins that sometimes the markings will come back if the fabric gets too cold. But if you just take an iron to it afterwards, it still goes away again. So it's one of those things you just have to keep into mind. All right, so I've pinned there so you can see what it's looking like. And I'm going to pin across the top. Sorry, hit the phone while I'm pinning, of course. And I'm not going to pin all the way across. I'm just going to pin like 3 or 4 places. And that basically is pinning my handle in place even more. Now, the back side will not have that extra bit of, because it does not pin, it does not get sewn all the way across because ours is a slip pocket, whereas this is a zipper pocket. Let me tell you, the first time I did this, I sewed it and didn't realize it was supposed to be sealed at the top. I had to go back after the bag was done and stitch it closed. Um, Made me kind of go, huh. Luckily, the recipient was my mother, and she called it and she's like, "Why is this like this?" And I went, "Oh, it's supposed to be sewn closed." Luckily, it was something I could do after the fact. So, not something I want to do again, but it's something I can fix if I were to ever come across it again. So, and one more pin in the middle, and I will feel better. And I will show you how I have it pinned. Okay. So just to show you, I have it pinned up at the top to equal that line that I had drawn that it's supposed to match up to. And I've pinned all the way around. So basically all we're going to do is we're going to take an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, even across the top. And if you're saying, "Oh, you've already got a top stitch right here," yes, but that will be another set of stitching that's right here at an 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Excuse me. And After this one, we will go ahead and work on the inside, since basically it's the same thing for the back, except you're making a slip pocket instead of a zipper pocket. All right, so I'm gonna move y'all back to the sewing machine. All right, we actually want to make sure our strap is up here so it's not in the way. Make sure when you're stitching, you are doing your reverse stitching. I know if you're a big quilter, but you're just starting to get into bag making, you're like, oh, but I don't um do back stitching and quilting. Well, as a bag maker, you kind of learn you have to. Otherwise, seams will pop or other things will happen. So right here, I'm making sure my handle is straight before I stitch over it. Make sure my zipper pull is out of the way. You're not going to come up near the zipper tape and the zipper per se, but you don't want to accidentally hit the zipper pull with that needle and break it. And watch it, it would be just my luck that my bobbin would run out right now. But I do have an extra one run already. So hopefully we won't run into that issue. But if we do, we'll come across deal with that as we come across it. Okay. Okay. So our pocket is actually sealed down now. And I am going to go the rest of the other three sides around. And if you see, I just sewed over the zipper tape and I'm actually going to do a reverse stitch over that and stitch over it again. And the main reason is just sealing that zipper pull in yet again, a little more than I have to. But it's just for my own peace of mind that if I accidentally unzip it, that I'm not going to lose my zipper pull. It really sucks if you have to take out stitches to put a zipper pull on. Had to do that recently, so never my favorite thing to do. Okay, so we're gonna go turn this sucker around. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask. If you hear a random dog bark, it just means that my cocker spaniel has gotten spooked by something going on. I have my teenager and my husband watching silly stuff on the TV, so who knows sometimes. They're in another room, that doesn't mean I don't hear them. But I love when you have random threads that just end up on top of your fabric. So like I said, we are going the rest of the way around. And like I said previously, I just like to do a little reverse stitch over the zipper teeth and then a reverse stitch to finish off. All right. So just to show you, we have a completed front. And if I were to unzip, you have a completed zipper pocket. Closed in. I'm not going to unzip all the way because then, well, I can unzip all the way. If you see, there is our straps, and I will zip it back up. I mainly just don't zip it all the way over to here right now because I know I'm going to have to add my gusset and then this could be in my way. And I prefer the zipper to be zipped while I'm sewing. So that's the reason I leave it in the middle right there. So yet again, so if you see, we've added the stitching across the top where it finished off that pocket. And you see we have our strap connector. This we have a so if you see this is 1 inch wide webbing. For the actual crossbody strap, I use 1.5 inch wide, so that's the difference there. So the next part for that is that we take to finish this up, we will take our piece of mesh that has a zipper in the middle of it. And if you see, I already have my zipper pull on it. And I will clip it in place. And if you notice, it is bigger than my front. So we are going to sew it around. Any excess we trim off. And after we're done with that, we round the corners. I'm not rounding the corners right now, but that's where you get that nice rounded corner. So I will actually, this is because this is mesh. This thing stuff is a pain in the rear. So I'll pull my little thing of clips, my little dragon bowl, watches my clips. And I will clip this on. And now I don't clip it on all four sides. I just clip one side where it's uniform, or two sides, should I say, two sides where it's uniform. And because the other two sides it's going to be too big on. So I want to make sure it's flat on those two sides. And then after that, I will trim off what's left. But basically, if you tried to put this on before you put the front pocket on, you'd end up sewing this closed. So you always do your outsides before your insides for that very reason. Like I said, I don't use tons of clips, just enough to hold it in place while I'm stitching. And see, I will start up here and go around and then hold it down to do the next part. Got to trim my threads here. And apparently my stomach is making funny noises, so I apologize if y'all hear that. It shouldn't be that loud, but if you do, I don't know why. But we are just going to clip this right here. So hopefully y'all are enjoying the random tips I'm giving. And I'll put one more clip just to hold it at the very end. So like I said, when I clip, because if you look, it's going to hang over here, it's going to hang down here. I'm going to clip it on two sides because I know I don't want to trim down here. If I have excess, I want to trim over the bigger part. So I clip from the top and from one side, and then I will trim the excess off. So we're going to go ahead and sew that down. Move my little dragon bowl out of the way. Sorry, drinking a little water. And I apologize if you were a little sideways. All right, so we're going to stitch this down. And yet again, because we're just kind of basting everything together at this point, we are just using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're not doing, because the seam allowance for most of this bag is a 1/4 of an inch. So basically, we're inside our seam allowance when we're basting all our layers together. The exception is like when we added the top part of the zipper pocket, I used 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, but that's top stitching. Top stitching usually is done with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So there's a difference. So we're just going a little bit around. Okay, and we're going to rotate. The biggest thing when you have mesh, these little hooks that hold your thread in place, make sure your little hook doesn't get caught in the mesh. That's how I know. Now, next week, I will be doing something a little different. I will be showing how I take a normal circle bag and turn it into a pin bag. Um, I do it pretty regularly with bags because I have a teenager who loves to collect pins. So I have a lot of, I've altered a lot of different patterns for pin bags. I'm specifically bag. I've already made one for my daughter, but I had a customer who talked to me about wanting one as well. So I figured why not share with how I make a regular bag into a pin bag. And we are halfway around. So now this is the part that hangs down. So if you see anything here is extra, I'm just trying to make sure I don't have my wedding in the seam or anything like that. I have done that too. That's always so much fun to have to pull out the seam ripper, which, if you know, you know, always have one handy. And if you need a really good seam ripper, go to Hannah Woodworking. She actually makes all the resin and wood seam rippers, the handles of them herself. This is one of her resin ones. Um, I have a pin from her that is around here somewhere that's made with purple heart wood. Let's see. But I also have like lots of different things I have of hers that I really like. So I have a little baby on a chain seam ripper. So if you need a really good seam ripper that's also pretty, especially, i I will suggest you go to Hannah Woodworking. She also makes lots of other things like pattern weights and things like that as well. But let's just say of all I have all kinds of her stuff. So I have a seam roller that's one of hers as well. So I'm just going around here, making sure I've got everything all the way around. Let's move you back up here. All right, so we have trimmer threads. So if you can see, I do have the excess, so I will trim that off. You could take a rotary cutter to it. I just prefer my scissors. These are Gingers, so they cut wonderfully. Now I'll trim the first side off, which is the bottom at this case, and I will keep trimming off my extra mesh. And technically, you can make all these pockets with vinyl too if you preferred. In some ways, it makes it really stiff or thicker as well, depending on what the type of vinyl is, what weight the vinyl is. And if you don't know, the different weights are how flexible the vinyl is, how thick it is, how well it takes holes and everything. Trimming everything even right here. Sometimes things are not always the most even. All right. Of course, I'm covered in that. So all that's left, so if you see, we have our mesh pocket right here, and then we have our exterior pocket. So I have, when you buy any pattern, she includes a circle that you can trace to trace off your um, curves. And I will do that. I do that usually all at the same time when I do these, the pages, the front and back. I do them all at the same time. Then I start binding and attaching to gussets and all that stuff at the same time. So I'm going to set this to the side. So at this point, I'm going to throw it kind of to my cutting table to where I'll mark it. And so normally I would go ahead and do the back, but just to show you kind of what I do with zippers, I'm going to go ahead and do one of the inside pages, at least the front part, or at least one section. So just to show you now, my of course my heat erase pen kind of died on me, but if you can kind of see, I put, it has chalk markings that I can see at least that are white, but of course this is blindingly yellow. You can kind of see it. Um, but you can see it on the other side. If you see, there's my divider right here. So I'm gonna have two up here, one here, and two up down here, and then two down here, and then single and single right here. Of course, you want to get all these extra pieces of thread out before you're doing all that. So when I do this, I have my zipper tape. I've already sewn it. I have sewn it to it and top stitch. So if you can see my top stitching. But if you look on the back here, you can see two sets of stitching. One is attaching it up at the top, and then the top stitching below it. So since that top pocket here, it's going to have two pockets, then I need to pull two zipper pulls. So I have my little baggie of zipper pulls because otherwise I end up with zipper pulls everywhere. So the first one has two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and thread two of these on. So for to thread zipper tape, of course, now some people will go ahead and put the zipper tape on before they attach it to anything, and that's completely fine. I just find I like doing as little sewing as I have to with the pull on there until, because then you have to keep moving the pulls here, there, and not throw them apparently. Like I just threw it on the floor. Don't demonstrate with your pull, you might lose it. But to attach a pull, you open your teeth. And the way I do it is that since my ends of my thread, my zipper tape are even with each other, then what I do is that I will look into the thing and you can see when the zipper tape is kind of even with each other. And I will pull it up. And before I pull it out all the way, you can see the edge of my zipper tape is very flush with each other. So I will just pull it on. I have some people say I do this way too easy. When you've made as many bags as I had, you get that. And now there's nothing wrong. There are zipper jigs that people will put on where they can just thread it on. There's nothing wrong with using that. I've used a fork before. I've used all kinds of things, but I find the best way for me is to slide one partially in, the other side partially in until I can get them where they are even by looking down in the back of the zipper pull where they are even with each other. And then I pull it through. And so if you can see, they're level with each other. So I always make sure that the ends of my zipper tape are level first before I try to put a pull on. So I've already done this. And if you notice, this is an overhang because this will be cut off. So I did not bother cutting it off. So I'm going to pin this. Now by Annie, I have four sets of markings here. This is where I'm going to go flush to. It will be covered up by, I'll show you after I get this attached, I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go to the inside marking to take my zipper tape and I'm going to pin it across the top. And I apologize if I'm shaky. I have a slight tremor, so sometimes it shows up more than others. So if I'm shaking, I apologize. This is the reason I use a stand for my phone instead of trying to hold it or anything because I do shake. And it always, y'all don't want to have a shaky video. So I'd rather just not. This is why my husband's in charge of all videos when we go on vacations and stuff because some things have gotten better for that technology, but not all things. But I've had a trimmer since I was 19, so that's not going to change anytime soon. All right, so I have pinned it. And just so you can see I'm pinning it to the inside one. So I will go ahead and if you see here, the mesh actually overlaps. We will trim that off as well. So when Biani does, she actually tells you slightly bigger than you actually need because you don't want to have it too short. And then you're having to stretch it. And it's better to have a little extra and have to trim it off than to not have enough and be going, oh boy, I got to recut a piece. That's never fun. So we're going to move over to the sewing machine. Okay. I'm actually going to take a little dot. There it is. This is one of my favorite pens. This is a washable, or should I say erasable marking pen. Just because it's a little brighter, I'm going to actually do a little dot so I can see when I need to turn. I know where my stuff is, and then I can take and use the back side of it to erase it. One of my favorite marking things, tools. But because that yellow is so vibrant, even my um, white chalk is having trouble showing up. There are other colors, but other colors have trouble washing away, in my opinion. And I don't want it to linger. So I just deal with it. So we're sewing this on. Like I said, we're attaching everything with an eighth of an inch seam allowance. And if you're wondering, well, you have those dark marks. Why didn't you use the heat erase mark? Well, I would have, except my ink while I was marking right before supper. So that wasn't gonna happen. So I'm dealing with what I got. It's doable. I've done it with worse before. The one I previously did had like diamonds, and watching that made things interesting. So we're going to back up. And those two little boxes were actually sewing like dead in between them. And we're going to sew everything down. Where's my little mark go? Of course it went and disappeared on me. Okay, there it is. Where's my little thing? Make it a little darker. Here we go. It's the only thing, sometimes they want to disappear on you before you even get to it. All right. And the main reason is that you can sew all this all the way across without stopping. But what I do is that I will actually turn and sew up. Okay. Do one more stitch. Not quite there. There we go. Then I will stitch all the way up. And yet again, I'm going over a zipper tape. So especially since this is where the two pockets are dividing, I will actually go over it more than once. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down, stitch over all my stitching again to make that pocket very secure. So I'm just basically stitching over my previous stitching. And we're going to keep going around. And yet again, I will go over this more than once because that's sealing off that zipper. So we've completed that. We are going to trim our threads on the back. And then we are going to trim within an eighth of an inch of our stitching. I'm not trimming the sides yet. I'll wait to trim that till I have all the pockets on. You can trim it. It's not, that's a personal preference. So right now I'm trimming the mesh down to about an eighth of an inch below the stitching. And the reason being, because we don't want the excess mesh down there while we sew the next pocket on. Okay, let's shake this in the trash can. And if you're wondering, I do have the trash can right below me. So no worries on that regard. All right. So our next thing is to put our next pocket on. So I have our next one prepped. Of course, I've already trimmed this edge and we have our excess over here. Oh, and something I forgot to bring up with the other one, when you actually trim your zipper tape, let me grab it. Where you trim it, you should flame it. And I say that because otherwise the zipper tape will unravel. So that's just something you should do after each one, after you trim off the zipper tape, because that nylon thread will unravel. All right, so what we're going to do, that line that we used as our stitching line, we are going to put our next zipper tape up against, and we're going to pin it. So we are getting that done real quick. And I just realized I have not put my zipper pull on. This is where you realize, oh boy, I'm not sewing it. Yes, I could take it off and put it on. And if you feel more comfortable, do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I am just going to lift up the end right here, especially since I'm only putting one zipper pull for one pocket right here. Just not open it up. And put my two ends in, kind of make them even. And there we go. And slide it on. And I just kind of put it in the center there. Now I have people say, that's crazy how fast you get a zipper pull on. It takes lots of practice, but you get to where it's second nature almost. And one more pin should do it. So a lot of times I don't use a lot of pins, but just to show you, when I want it even with a line, I want it not to move. That's the best way to put it. All right, so we'll do this next one. And we are going to sew this down yet again. Now, this time we won't be going up and dividing it because I'm only doing one pocket here. So we will just do a complete eighth of an inch all the way around, which in some ways makes it easier. Make sure you move your zipper pull all the way so you don't accidentally run over it with the needle by accident. Some zipper pulls will get in your way more than others. Of course. Okay. So we are sewing this down. Now, I could have done yellow on top of the yellow for the mesh, but because I did actually have a golden yellow that matched like that webbing. But since I'm doing like yellow accents on top of the black fabric that has the tulips on it, I wanted to do the black accents on top of the yellow lining fabric. And to me, that makes it just really kind of sing a little bit. To me, it adds some pizzazz to the bag. And all the hardware I'm using is gunmetal, which to me really does well against all the yellow accents. The only other way I would have gone there is to maybe use gold hardware and gone completely different way. So yet again, we're going to trim down this mesh down to about an eighth of an inch. This is just so it doesn't possibly get caught in your zipper for the next level. So we're just going to go across and we're just going to get this last pocket done. And then we will stop for tonight and I'll explain what the next step would be. Now, this will be done before my live next week because, like I said, it's in order. So I will actually let's dump this in the trash can. Okay. Ooh, apparently, I left one little piece of mesh. Right, we're going to pin that last piece on. Now, this one again has two pockets. So, yet again, I'm going to mark where I marked with my white chalk earlier, just so you can see I've made little dots, little pink dots. But if you're wondering, if you remember, I told you earlier that this is just to show you, a marking pen that I love because it erases itself. So you see the dots, you take the other end of this off, you can tell I've used it a good bit. And if you basically put it on there, it disappears. If I can find the one that's not dried out, which I have over here. But it also, there it is. There's my non-dried out one. So that pink one is a lot older than this. This is another pink one. But just to show you, that's what the end looks like. That is the quote unquote eraser. And I can actually take that to the pink. So those pink dots you saw just a minute ago are completely gone. So yet again, I will do that again. I have my little pink dots, but just to show you, that is a marking pen that is great. It's by Marvy. Just to show you, I put it back. There's my little pink dots just so I can follow it just a little better. All right, so we're going to pin that last pocket. I'll turn y'all back to the fabric. And we're going to go ahead. This has two pockets again, so we are going to put two zipper pulls on this. And no, this is not all the zipper pulls I have. This is just all the zipper pulls I have in that bag. I have a whole nother bag of zipper pulls. These zippers and the webbing and the hardware all came from my handmade space. Um, if I'm trying to have where since I'm using gunmetal teeth on this zipper tape, I want when it's better to order from all from necessarily wouldn't necessarily need to order the webbing from that too, but if I'm using hardware, I want all my hardware to match. And when you want all your hardware to match, you need to order it from the same supplier, whether it be zipper tape, so that the teeth match your pulls, so they match your rectangle rings, your swivel clips, all that. That's my biggest suggestion is that you will actually buy it from all one location. I buy from a lot of different places, not just one or two. So we're gonna pin this in place. So we will go to the inside line again. I hear my dog running around. But we are going to pin this in place and get this sewn on, and then we will have one side of this pocket done. All right. Or this removable page done. All right. Almost done. And I've had people ask, how long does this bag take? Well, if you count quilting and everything combined, probably about a week. Um, I can once everything's quilted, it takes me about 3 days. Sometimes quilting takes me a long time. Sometimes it's quick. It just depends. Also depends my children's schedules. Like yesterday, I spent the whole day doing doctor visits and haircuts for my girls. So I didn't get a lot done yesterday. But my girls are out on spring break, so I'm not gonna. As much as I want to get done this week, it doesn't always happen. So we are going to sew all the way down to that and sew it with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance yet again. Of course, my pink dots are wanting to disappear. That's the other thing. With this fabric, it will actually evaporate. Not fabric. With this marking pen, it will actually evaporate as well. It's my favorite marking pen. I have it in pink and purple. I wish sometimes it came in um, a white so that I could use it on dark fabrics. Okay. So we're where we're splitting the pockets. And here's where I said where the mesh gets caught on that little hook thingy. So we're going to go all the way up. So we're going to turn it around. And like I said, you could sew the pocket completely on, then go back and divide your pockets. But I find this way you're basically actually stitching it almost twice so that it is has double the amount of strength in it. So that's the reason I do it that way. You can do it either way. It works. Eh, And we're going to sew this last side, and then we will trim off any excess mesh I have, mesh and zipper tape, should I say. Okay. So I am done with that side. So if you see, and the reason why I have two sets of lines right here on both sides is that we have what's called page facings, and I will stick it in between the two outside lines, and that will cover all raw edges. Of course, I won't do that until I get the next side done as well, and I will get it. And I have to do the other side as well, and put the page facing there as well, and that will cover raw edges on both sides. So I'll have a page facing on the front and the back, and after that, I will round corners and put binding on, and the pocket is done. So just to show you, if I were to pull out one of my pages from my bag, I'll show you what one completed looks like. So this is a completed one. So if you see the page face, that covers up any raw edges in the inside. You don't see them because they're covered by that on the front and the back. And as you see, I've got my divided pockets like I just did, the three smaller ones, the two larger ones. Then I have an even bigger one on the back, and I have a vinyl pocket on the other side of the back. So all those are, and you can play with how many pockets you want and all that stuff. So it makes things interesting. But that's it for tonight. I will see y'all next week. And like I said, next week I will be showing how to take a regular circle bag and make a pin bag out of it. So I will see y'all next Wednesday.